In an earlier video, we looked at how to program your flight in this nice Saab 330. In this video, we're gonna look at how you can use the autopilot in this aircraft because it's kind of special and some things are working a little bit different than you might expect. But first, let's roll the intro. And we're in the cockpit of the Saab 330 and you can see a lot of gouges, a lot of buttons, and if you compare it with, for example, a Cessna 172, this is really next level, but also makes it more challenging. Now, with the normal aircrafts, you would expect all the autopilot functionality to be over here, but in this case, it's spread across the aircraft, right? So to access them, you can press Shift and 6, and that will bring you to the most important button, which is the autopilot master switch, which is over here. If you switch on this one, it will automatically activate the functions which you of course enabled. But besides that, there are some other things, and that's this button. This button is really critical because you can see that you can control the AP roll, but also the trim, which is this one. And this allows you to do certain things like climbing, right? Especially for the vertical speed mode, that I would say is kind of critical to use because else you can't configure that. So that's really something which you need to keep in mind because if you don't know where to search for, it will take you some minutes or maybe even hours to find this one. Now to access the other panel, you can press the Shift and the 7, and the Shift and the 7 will bring you to this one, which is the pane which you will recognize from a lot of aircrafts. So to start with, here's the altitude. So remember that we said the vertical climb mode or the vertical speed mode, that can be done, or the vertical speed, I would say climb rate, that's the better wording. This is the altitude which you can configure, and right, you can simply use this knob over here to change this number to 100, 400, 500, 600, but you can see currently it's a little bit broken, but that's likely due to the aircraft not being as started yet. So pretty interesting that you can still, I would say, control this one. Then if we look down, we can see the different buttons. We can see the heading mode, which will fly in a certain direction. We can see the vertical speed mode, which we again can control using that knob or that button pretty close to the autopilot master switch. We've got the half bank mode, right? Normally not used a lot. Then we've got the IS according to this button, but here it says FLC mode, which stands for the flight level change mode, which is, I would say, kind of interesting button. So you can either choose to use the vertical speed or the IS mode, or if you really want to go next level, you can also use the auto climb mode. And this is a special one, which I will showcase in a few minutes. Then, of course, we've got the navigation mode, which you can use to follow the navigation radio or the navigation signals. And you've got the approach mode. Currently, the approach mode does not work, at least not as far as I tested in this aircraft. It could be a limitation. I couldn't find any official confirmation that it was a limitation, but for me, it didn't work. And then, of course, we've got the altitude hold mode, which simply holds a specific altitude. And this one is also working perfectly fine. But what if you want to fly the heading mode, right? Where can you configure the heading in which you want to fly? Well, to do that, you need to go back again to that original pane, which is over here. And that's where you'll find this button, right? Let me move the position a bit. Here's the heading. So here you can configure the heading in which you want to fly, which you can, of course, use if you don't want to use the navigation, let's say, mode of the autopilot. And this one also can be turned again, right? You can see the numbers already changing here. And if you would enable the aircraft, right, would start the aircraft, you will also see it, I would say, being reflected in the displays over here. So that's pretty cool. So enough now for, I would say, the default modes, right? Let's get started. But to do that, I will simply skip the taxi part because that is not really interesting. And I will continue when I'm on the runway. So we're at the runway and we've been cleared for takeoff. But before taking off, we first need to make sure that we're setting up the autopilot. And to do that, we're gonna press that magic key, Shift and 7, and then move this altitude button to a higher altitude, right? So let's assume that we're first climbing to 5,000 feet. So we're sticking it like this. And the other thing which we might want to set up is that heading mode. And that can be done via this button. Again, keep in mind that if you switch the heading mode, it will likely, would say, act a little bit weird. In some cases, you will see that it's already aligned to the, direction of the runway. But you can also adjust it, right? You can simply adjust it by turning around this knob, and then it will simply move around. And as you can see, this blue marker moves. And you might ask, okay, hey, why are you using this blue marker instead of, let's say, the display? Well, the display is kind of hard to find. Normally, I would say you would be perfectly able to do that, right? Because if I press Shift and 1, you can see that here's that purple marker, and that's the direction in which we want to go flying. So with this, we're, I'd say, kind of good to go, right? So let's, I would say, reset the mode, reset the view, press Shift 0 if you're using the keyboard. Then I would say remove the parking brakes, which will, in my case, also open up the ATC. And then let's, I would say, get running, or let's get flying, I should say. So here we go. We're going to fly, and then we're going to climb to 5,000 feet, and we're going to maintain this current heading as we already programmed in the Autopilot. So here you can see that we're making speed. Very good. Pull back the stick. Gears up. And let's say that we want to activate the Autopilot now. So what we need to do in that case is press the Shift and the 6 and then activate the Autopilot, which will also automatically activate the yaw damper. Now, if you did that, you can press Shift and 1, or you can move to this display manually, and you can see that the Autopilot is activated. However, none of the modes have been activated. So to do that, what we need to do, of course, is enable that magic mode over here. We want to enable the heading mode in this case, which will make sure that we're flying into the correct heading. And here you will see directly that this changes, right? It directly changed to the heading mode. Now, if you want to make sure that we're climbing, we can activate that flight level change mode, or IS mode. If we now look at the display again, we can see that the IS is set to 193 because that's the current speed. And that will be the speed which we try to maintain and then make sure that we're climbing to that specific altitude. In this case, that 5,000 altitude, right? So really nice. The aircraft will simply start to climb until it reaches that altitude. However, there's something which you really need to keep in mind. And now you might think, what is that thing, right? You didn't hear me talking because I needed to drink some water. But what was it where you need to keep in mind? Well, one of the things is that this mode, right, that IS mode, let me press the keyboard again, that this IS mode doesn't stop climbing at this 5,000 altitude. That's something which is really important for you to understand, because if you would normally try this the first time and then think, okay, hey, I can, let's say, for example, grab some water or do a bio break, then it will pass that 5,000 feet easily. If you want to make sure that it stops climbing at that certain altitude, then it might be better to use the Autopilot climb mode or the vertical speed mode, which will stop climbing at that specific altitude. For now, I will leave it as is, and I will press that altitude hold mode. That altitude hold mode will simply stop climbing at this altitude which it currently has. So if I would press it now, you will see that it has switched now to altitude mode over here and will stop climbing, right? It will even, I would say, go a little bit slower. It will go to 4,600 feet, but that's not the altitude which we want, right? We want to go to that 5,000 feet. So let's change it again and then show you the other options. So let's first press that auto climb mode. And the auto climb mode is pretty interesting because the auto climb mode also comes with a speed which is need to maintain. In this case, 120 climb is the first mode, but if we press it again, you will see that it changes to 140. Now if you press it again, it will change it to 160 in some cases until it has reached that specific altitude. However, there's a special thing about this, and now we just missed it. So let me change the altitude a bit to 4,500 and then press the buttons again. So climbing 140. This will make sure that we're climbing at that specific altitude. You can press it again, but you already hear those beeps, and those beeps are because it changes modes. It now has changed the mode to altitude, and as you can see, it currently continues climbing until we reach that 5,500 feet, and then it will simply stop climbing at that altitude. So this one is more suitable if you want to climb to a certain altitude and then stop climbing. One of the things which is not in this aircraft is the aircraft speed, so you need to keep an eye on the aircraft speed yourself, although there's a button here which says, okay, hold speed mag mode. I do think that is related to the IS mode, but not 100% sure about that, because there's no button where you can say directly activate or limit the speed. So now we're flying at that specific altitude. We also might want to descend, right? So we can say change this button again. If you do that, you hear the beeps, but nothing will change by default. If you want to do that, you need to activate that vertical speed mode, which you can use to reduce altitude, right? That's one of the options. And to change the, let's say, vertical speed, right, which is now activated, by the way, I pressed it, right? You can see VS and Alt-S, which means Alt selected has been deactivated. We need to turn this knob trip, or this pitch trim, sorry. And that's what you can do, right? You can simply, let's say, move it over into the correct direction, because you can see you can move it either positive or negative. And if you're moving it negative, you already know what's going to happen. It will start descending into the, I would say, altitude which we pre-configured. Always keep an eye on these signals, right? Always keep an eye on the vertical speed and all the other signals, because else some things will go wrong. This vertical speed mode has the same, I would say, advantage as the climb mode, because it will stop descending in this case at 5,000 feet, which is really cool. Now, what if we want to fly into a different direction? Now, well, that's where that heading mode comes into play, right? We can change the mode. We can change to, for example, 300, and you will see that the aircraft directly starts to turn also here. Also, if we switch to this view, you can see it directly starts to turn into that direction, which is nice. But what if you want to fly, for example, a real flight using a pre-programmed flight plan? Well, that's something which you, of course, first need to program. And of course, I also didn't do that. So let's do that first. Let me find the right button. Here we go. That's the same one. So we press accept. And then we go to menu, if I remember correctly. Let's go to flight plan first. There's no flight plan at all, right? You can see, which I would say makes it hard to say kind of define the flight plan. But let's say that our departure was ES Charlie Foxtrot, and then you can hit the enter button and then say accept, and then say what was it, runway, this is likely not the correct airport, right? So need to change this. So let's go back. I'm pretty sure which airport was it. ESGL maybe then. So always become prepared, well, because else things will go wrong, of course. ESGL, no, ESGL, don't forget to hit the enter button, of course. And hopefully it will update it, although I don't think it updates it now. So let's do it differently in that case. Let's go to the menu. No, let's use the direct to mode. Because the direct to mode is, I would say, kind of easy, because the direct to mode can be used to fly into an airport or a waypoint directly, right? So currently it says direct to, and then we can say either left or right, or we can say auto, and that will automatically set this into the flight plan. So what I expect to happen, again, is if I switch that navigation mode, the aircraft will start to turn. But as you can see, I currently can't switch to that navigation mode. And that likely has to do because I completely screwed up the flight plan. So let me reset the flight plan and then I'll say show you how to do that. Resetting the flight plan, I will do it manually, and then we'll continue the recording afterwards. So I fixed the flight plan, and what I simply did is I added also a destination airport, which is in this case at the airport over here, or ESSF, was it? or a different one, and it's 52 nautical miles from here. So now if we activate the navigation mode, let's do that. You will see that it now switches to navigation mode in the display over here, and the airport will, or the aircraft, sorry, will start turning. Not the airport, would be a little bit, let's say, weird if the airport starts turning. But this makes it, let's say, fly the direction, and if it flies into the correct direction, we will end up at the airport which we programmed in our flight plan. The similar thing, of course, you can do if you add multiple waypoints in here. It will simply follow that whole pattern until you're at the destination, which makes it, I would say, I think, really nice. And this is easier for you if you don't want to keep an eye on the direction continuously. Of course, if you're, say, happy to control everything yourself, you can still do that. But hey, for now, you can change this as is. So you can fly the heading mode. If you want to fly a certain direction, and if you want to follow the radio systems, which you, or the beacons, the navigates, which you configured in your flight plan, you can use that navigation mode. And with this, we're kind of at the end of this video, because I already mentioned that the approach mode, in my case, I wasn't able to get it working. If you were able to get it working, then let me know via the comment box below, because I'm really interested in how you get it working. Maybe it's something to do with the radios, I'm not sure, but I will post an update on this video once I figured out how to use that approach mode. Here ends the video. I hope you liked it. If you liked it, then consider to use the like button, and of course let me know if you want to have a specific video about any other topic based on this specific aircraft, the Saab 330. Thanks again for watching, and hope to see you back next time.